Hi, good morning, afternoon, evening, night, whatever it might be for you. Um, so, I'm just giving an update on the books I'm reading and some ideas I've had floating in my mind for a while. Um, my last video was a little over a month ago, and since then, honestly, I've not read as much as I'd really like to. During productive times of the year when I am very focused and very driven or passionate, I'll read an average of 3 hours a day, which comes out to about I read about a page every 2 minutes, so 3 hours is roughly 100 pages. Um, so during productive times of the year, I'll finish a decent book in 2 or 3 days, and if I'm doing that at least every other day, I finish roughly a book a week. Um, so that's like productive times of the year. I'm reading about a book a week. But I would say for the last few months at least, maybe it coincides with starting my notebook, is now I'm kind of thinking, well, I'm not just reading to learn or to enjoy what I'm reading, but I'm reading to find things to take notes on, and I'm rereading the book because I want to double check to see what I might have missed that I would like to take notes on. So that's part of it, but it's also just well, maybe I'm having a little bit of a personal identity issue where I'm thinking, well, what's the point of reading all these books? Is it really helping me? Am I really getting smarter? Um, I don't know. I mean, what is the opportunity cost? What are most people doing? Playing video games, watching series, going out and having fun. And I'm not sure personally if any of that is any better than reading. But anyway, so I haven't read as much as I'd like to. But yeah, a month and a half. In my last video, I said that I had just finished the two Geoffrey Miller books, Spent and The Mating Mind. I had misspoken, actually. I was on the last or second to last chapter of The Mating Mind, so I finished that. And actually, I was only like 2/3 of the way through Spent. So I finished that. So effectively, that's like half a book or so. That just finishing up those two books that for some reason I thought I'd already finished. But well, they're on PDF, they're on Kindle, so it's not as easy to just see like where the bookmark is in a book and see, oh, I'm almost done. It's more just, well, I open up the PDF and, oh yeah, there's still like 100 pages left or something. But I finished those two books. They're pretty good. I took a lot of notes. Spent gets really interesting near the end. Geoffrey Miller is basically trying to argue that most of our consumer decisions, most of our cultural decisions even, are ways of signaling our IQ, personality traits, like health generally. He calls it proteanism, the ability to be like creative and random and unexpected. That in a lot of ways, that's what we do when we buy new clothes or I don't know, consume videos online or make videos online or just a lot of these decisions we make in life that actually, in a sense, a lot of them are just trying to find ways to signal our IQ or our personality traits. So yeah, that was pretty cool, and he gives lots of examples about, well, I don't want to get too much into it. I mean, I'd have to reread the notes because I'm not even that familiar enough to just off the top of my head say, but yeah, just ways of signaling agreeableness, openness to experience, conscientiousness, those types of things is in a lot of ways that's what we do when we consume fashion or media or all these things that we do. So that was cool. And then when I made the last video, I was about 1/3 of the way through Women by Natalie Angier. Since then, I finished the book, but I stopped taking notes about 2/3 of the way through. I just kind of wanted to get through the book. And honestly, the last third of the book was pretty interesting. It's more or less the same of what I've read in other like evolutionary psychology books, like Sarah Blaffer Hrdy or David Buss or Geoffrey Miller or lots of books. Even Deborah Tannen. I mean, a lot of the book was about how men's relationships with each other are these like teamwork things where we just try to have a lot of people who share common interests with us, and we just make a lot of friends, men. But women's relationships are more like one-on-one types of deals, and she says, well, maybe it has something to do with like the evolutionary origins of why friendships exist, because men go hunting together, but women, they can help each other raise each other's kids, but otherwise they might actually just get in the way. So it says maybe women developed these like personality types where they have these really intimate, close, one-on-one relationships with another woman. But if something goes wrong, they like completely switch to actually like detesting each other and not being able to stand each other at all anymore. And Deborah Tannen basically said the same thing in a lot of her books. And so I thought, well, that's interesting that there's this weird dynamic that men have between relationships, and it's completely different than what women have between relationships. Or at least that's what she says. So I thought that was interesting. So I finished Women by Natalie Angier. And honestly, that's like it for books that I finished. So yeah, I've not been that productive, really. What I did do, well, honestly, ever since I got this new Game Boy, maybe this is a bit of a problem, but I got back into Pokemon. I have Pokemon Yellow, Pokemon Crystal, Pokemon Gold. I have 2 copies of Pokemon Silver, and I have this EverDrive that lets me emulate like a second copy of Pokemon Crystal. And so basically what I did was, I don't know if this is like an addiction or just like maybe a mental regression, like I'm so bored in life, I have no idea what to do next in my life, that I'm just regressing to what I was doing when I was 12, just playing a lot of Pokemon. I don't know. It's kind of fun in a way. It does kind of like encourage your mind to creatively come up with teams of Pokemon. I like to use weak Pokemon to see if you can't overcome like they're being really weak by just being creative with what moves you have access to. So played through Pokemon Crystal, the actual cartridge that I have. I got into the point just before Lake of Rage, and I kind of didn't want to go any further. And then I replayed again on the EverDrive of Pokemon Crystal, and I got to the 3rd gym, and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting to just play the game differently, use weaker Pokemon or something. Then I got it in my mind that I wanted to breed shiny Pokemon, so I had to play through Yellow again, because I had already used my Mimic TM. So you have to get Mimic TM, that's like halfway through the game. Then you have to get further in the game, and so you can catch Ditto, and then you trade over your Red Gyarados from your Gen 2 file, and then you have it learn Mimic, you fight a Ditto. Ditto uses Transform twice because you Mimic Transform, and then you catch a shiny Ditto, you trade it back to Gen 2, and then you can breed it with any Pokemon, and you have a 1 in 64 chance of breeding a shiny Pokemon. So I did that. That was like a 10 hour project on Pokemon Yellow, and then I've spent maybe 35 hours in total on Pokemon Crystal grinding for shinies. I started out, I just wanted Eevee so I could get all the evolutions. And then I wanted Pichu because it would be cool to have shiny Pikachu, I don't know. And then I thought, well, why don't I round it out and get all the Kanto starters? So I did. Bulbasaur, Squirtle, Charmander. And yeah, that was like a 35 hour grind. And I'm done now. I have all the Kanto starters, Pikachu and Eevee. And I found out how to do the clone glitch on Pokemon Crystal, so I cloned them a bunch, and I traded them all to my other cartridges, just in case that file loses its battery. And then I started replaying Gold, and I traded over Charmander. The only one I was smart enough to clone as an egg was Charmander. All the other ones would show up as traded Pokemon. So that's kind of weird. You can't rename them. They gain double experience or something, so it kind of breaks the game, makes it too easy. So I just used Charmander because that was the one I had as an egg, and I'm about back to where I was in Crystal, but on Gold. I just finished Goldenrod. I'm just kind of wandering around. But, yeah, so that's probably the reason why I haven't done a lot of reading lately. But, I have done some reading. I went to Goodwill one day, and I just found a bunch of random books, and I thought, actually, these are pretty interesting books. So I picked them up. Apocalypse Never. I only read, the introduction. I took a class at university called Environment and Economics, and it basically said, like, look, the environment is declining in, like, all these measures, but humans are pretty creative. We just come up with new ways of preserving resources and coming up with new resources and using resources more efficiently. Technology's always advancing. That's what was it? I forget which book it was, but Thomas Schelling, like one of the chapters about environment, he basically says, look, technology's always improving, and people are almost always better off in the future than they were in the past. So it follows that even if we destroy a lot of the forests and ocean life and ocean acidification, and all these things that are very real, desertification of agricultural land, desertification of pastoral land for animal grazing. Even if it's the case that we're destroying all this land, like humans are pretty creative, we'll actually just come up with new technologies, new ways of more intensively using the land, and actually we're generally going to actually be better off in the future, regardless of what we do with the environment today. So that's pretty much what this book, I assume, is about, but I haven't read very much into it. So. I picked up this book. I thought it was pretty cool. Marriage, a History. Listened to an interview with the author. It seems interesting, but it's very European-centric, and honestly, I find that very ignorant in a way, or maybe that's just what the project was for her writing this book. Stephanie Kuntz. Apparently, she's a well-respected author. Helen Fisher recommended her book. That's, if I haven't said it before, that's like the main mechanism I use to pick a book that's worthy of being read, is if a really well-respected author has recommended that book. I'll go into a bookstore and I'll look at 30 books that seem they might be interesting, but I'll buy none of them because none of them have a well-respected author who can vet the quality of the book. So yeah, that's like the main way that I find a book that's worth my time, is if a well-respected author who I've already read has recommended the book. So anyway, this one has Helen Fisher recommending it, and yeah, as I said, it's very European-centric, so it's, unfortunately, it doesn't talk about all these other cultures who have completely different marriage customs, evolutionary, what do you call it, like functional adaptations to just the way that humans need to pair bond. There's males have paternity uncertainty. We need to know with a high degree of certainty that a wife will be pretty loyal. Otherwise, we have no incentive to be a father. We could just leave and to go do something else with our time. So males have this problem of paternity uncertainty because humans have very high male parental investment. If we were like chimpanzees, we just left as soon as the baby was made. Then we would have no reason to care about paternity uncertainty. We'd just, I don't know, try to get around a lot and then just leave. But we don't. We stay around to be fathers, and in order for that to work, you need a lot of paternity certainty. And women have a similar problem. They have this, they only have so many useful cycles in their life, and it's very costly to have a child at 9 months of pregnancy, 2 years in indigenous cultures, about 2 years of breastfeeding, another 8 years or something of just having to at least share the responsibility to help the kid raise until it's able to at least gather on its own. And that's very costly, and so most cultures, women require either lots of family resources, like in Sarah Blaffer Hrdy, Mothers and Others, or a father who will stay around, and so they have a problem of being able to ensure that they pick someone who's good enough to do that, presumably. But anyway, I thought it's going to be a cool book, but it is very it just completely misses like 9/10 of the world's cultures and different times and histories and different environmental constraints, different cultural institutions that shape marriage. And so I thought, well, it's going to be a cool book, but it's because it's only based on Europeans, it's really missing like a large chunk of how humans have come up with ways to manage this problem of like pair bonding. I picked up this one, I read like a quarter of the way through it, and I thought, well, this is actually pretty interesting. I want to reread it when I have the time and actually take notes on it. It mainly has Sarah Blaffer Hrdy and Deborah Tannen who recommended it. So I thought, well, it has to be good. Sarah Blaffer Hrdy is one of the best authors I've read on like anthropology and evolution. Deborah Tannen is one of the best authors I've read on like linguistic, psychological differences between men and women, and just these types of broad concepts of trying to understand how humans behave and why. So yeah, that'll be pretty cool, I suppose. Let's see. A couple of random books I just thought were pretty good. Stiff, Mary Roach, Quiet by Susan King. I bought this before, but dropped it and I lost it. And well, so now I have it again. I didn't like it actually the first time I read it. I read about a third of the way through, and I got to this part about how all these fans of this very what is it called? Just this very extroverted, like public speaker who is able to rile people up to be very confident in themselves, and actually I got kind of disgusted reading that part because it's talking about all these people who are like I don't remember the word it was using, but it was just all these fans are like gyrating and like lustfully dancing to the voice of this guy, and I just thought, that's disgusting. I don't want to read that. That completely goes against like the virtues and values I care about, like modesty and reserve, and I don't know, intellectual virtues over extroversion, and yeah. So I didn't really like it, but presumably it's good. It has a lot of recommendations from people who have read it. It probably will be good eventually. So those are the books that I bought at like Goodwill, and I was actually surprised that they had such good books. I thought there'd be cheap, random, no-name authors about getting rich quick and self-help and all the things that you find at like a Target or Walmart, and I don't know, they're just meant to kind of get you to, I don't know, not really learn or do anything. Just read them, and I don't know. I don't care about them. So those books I never really read much into, but I picked them up. I might read them someday. I wanted to reread this one, The Weirdest People in the World, but I kind of got distracted. I found other books that were more useful with my time, but I'll want to read that eventually. What I have read is, I picked this one up, Why We Love by Helen Fisher, and I read through it in like 3 days, so that was pretty good. A lot of it is just the same thing you read in pretty much every book about evolutionary psychology and the anthropology of like I don't know, mating or sex or something. And I've read pretty much the same thing in like half a dozen books, maybe a dozen books at least. But it was still cool. Still had some neat new ideas. Took a lot of notes on it. Yeah, I would recommend it. Helen Fisher. E.O. Wilson. Oh, maybe that's why I bought it. E.O. Wilson recommended it. E.O. Wilson, I really recommend. So I finished that one at least. And then right now, I'm actually about 3/4 of the way through Human Diversity by Charles Murray. People seem to really not like Charles Murray. And I'm a bit confused why. He always says this, but I guess if you don't like him, you would refuse to listen to anything he said anyway. But he always says this. He always says, I get a really bad reputation for what I say, but if you read what I actually say, it's coded in like the available data that we have right now, and some uncertainties about what that data might mean, and some uncertainties about what the causes of that data are. And he tries to just present the evidence that's out there, and I really don't understand how people could hate him. That's like hating the messenger. When you don't like the message, or I don't know. Clearly there are these, this book's not even about it, but clearly there are IQ gaps between groups of people, and you could debate all you want about the causes, that's what it is right now. And until cultures change, or I don't know, you just have to deal with that there are IQ differences. What else can you do? Ignore the fact that there are IQ differences? Ignore the fact that, and then I started reading this book. I just read like 2 chapters. Heather McDonald, I really respect Heather McDonald. She writes about similar things, but she's very more direct and doesn't hide behind presenting it as just data. She says, in fact, there are these IQ differences, there are the academic achievement gaps that are huge, and they're about a standard deviation or 2. And that means that any given genius of a 140 IQ or higher, there'll be 10 times more proportionately for that population than there are in another group of people for that population. That actually it makes perfect sense that at the highest levels of academic achievement you'd have a difference of like 50 to 1 or something, if there is like a standard deviation and a half or something of difference in academic achievement or IQ or whatever we're measuring when we talk about that. So I thought that was, those are the facts, and so what do we do about it? What can we do about it? I don't know. I come from a pretty disadvantaged background as it is, like a single mother, living in a trailer park, like a lot of family disorder, and I did very poorly in high school, and then I kind of, once I matured a bit, I started doing a lot better, and I graduated the top 1% of my college, and then kind of lost interest, but I graduated top 10% or so of my university, magna cum laude, and that's one of the facts about IQ is that when you're young, IQ is more based on like environmental things, how supportive are your parents, how happy and supportive is your just family environment, how many books do you have access to, things like that. But as you get older, your IQ actually converges to like a genetic based IQ, and so people with presumably people with low IQ, when they're very young, you can make them very smart by training them to read a lot and do a lot of math, but as they get older, they kind of just do what they want to do, and their IQ will fall to a lower level, and vice versa. If you have a very disadvantaged background and a lot of family disorder, and your IQ would presumably be low when you're younger, but as you get older, your IQ achieves more of what it's genetically kind of wants to do, and your own choices shape how you live your life, and as you get older, your IQ rises to match what your genes would predict. So that's one known fact about IQ, is it's much more predictive of the long-term IQ in terms of your genetic background than it is about the early childhood IQ. So yeah, I'm like 2/3 of the way through Human Diversity, maybe 3/4. It's like 100 pages of notes, so honestly. Yeah, I'm on page 250 out of 310. So that's, that's like 5/6 of the way through the book or something. So I've been enjoying it quite a bit. I took a lot of notes on the part about gender and the first couple chapters about class that talks about heritability of like personality traits and IQ. And I tend to go back and take notes on the chapter about race, but a lot of it is just this really complex genetic theories about statistically measuring different types of gene differences and how you can determine like some probabilistic distribution based on populations and which rates of which genes exist in them, and it's very complicated. I don't think it's that useful for like a normal person to know, but anyway. And then I picked up these 2 books, Leonard, Mlodinow. Subliminal was recommended by Michael Shermer, who was very smart, well-respected author, so I thought I'd pick it up, and I picked up the other book too because they're there together. And I'm like 50 pages in to Subliminal, and it's more or less the same that I've already read in a lot of books on social psychology and behavioral economics and what's the guy's name? John Barg. Just people who already write on a lot of these topics. I've already read a lot of this before. But it's still cool. That's about it. That's about all I've read. So, I finished the 2 Geoffrey Miller books. I finished the last 2/3 of Women. I finished Why We Love, and I'm like 3/4 of the way through Human Diversity. So honestly, that only comes out to like 3 books or something over a month and a half. So maybe a book every 2 weeks. It's not a lot, but it's what I've been doing, I suppose. Anyway, so a lot of these topics overlap. So Human Diversity starts out by trying to explain to you what Jacob Coven's D means, and it's a way of measuring the difference in terms of standard deviations between 2 means, 2 different groups. And if you're not familiar with statistics, that's a pretty important measure, because if there's a 1 standard deviation difference between males and females in a trait like emotional stability, then that's pretty huge. That means that 1 standard deviation, if you're not that familiar with statistics, there's a bell curve, and the mean is the middle of the bell curve, where you could, if you don't know anything about someone, you could just expect it to be the mean. That's the base rate. And 1 standard deviation is a measure that basically says, let's see, what is it, 68% is within 1 standard deviation, so that leaves, what is it, 34% or something, 32%. So basically, if you're 1 standard deviation out, that's the top 16%, or the bottom 16% of the population. If you're 2 standard deviations out, that's 2 standard deviations is 95% of the population. So on either side of 2 standard deviations is only 2.5% of the population. And if you're 3 standard deviations out, that's 99.7% of the population. So there's only like 0.15% of the population who are 3 standard deviations out on any trait that's normally distributed. So what that means is, if you have a difference in IQ between 2 groups, that's 1 standard deviation. That means you have overlapping bell curves. 1 standard deviation out means that half of these people are equivalent to the top 16% of these people. So that's like, and if you go 2 standard deviations out, you'll find much bigger differences, because if there's a standard deviation of if there's 1 standard deviation between 2 means, 2 standard deviations out is 3 standard deviations out for the other group. Even 1 standard deviation out from the population that's 1 standard deviation above the other one. 1 standard deviation out includes 16% of them, but that's actually 2 standard deviations from the lower rating group, which is only 2.5% of their population. So, for instance, if you, let's just say mathematical ability, if 16% of one group is equivalent to only the top 2.5% of the other group, that's a pretty big difference of how many people you'll see represented at that level. And 3 standard deviations out versus 2 standard deviations out would be 2.5% of this group, and 0.15% of the other group would rank as that level. So it's standard deviations makes a pretty big deal. And so Coven's D is basically a way of bundling measures of 2 groups to find out how many standard deviations their means are from each other. And so a lot of differences between men and women get pretty big, and a lot of differences between academic skills gaps are pretty big. Let's see, where was a really big difference here? Anyway, maybe I didn't take notes on all the different data, but there are a lot of big differences. Anyway, so a lot of these books that I've been reading overlap in a lot of ways. I think it might have started with Selfish Reasons to Have More Kids by Bryan Caplan. And then The Mating Mind and Spent by Geoffrey Miller both kind of like doubled down on this idea. And then Human Diversity like triples down on this idea. And I swear there's even like a fourth or fifth book that also just like doubled down on these ideas that IQ and personality traits are like highly, highly heritable. So it's just the case that I mean, you don't want to go into eugenics territory and say that some people are just smarter than other people, and it's a genetic, like, breed type of deal. But certainly if, well, for instance, in my mind, I kind of play with the idea as a useful heuristic, and I don't take it too seriously, but it's just kind of a joke in a way. It's this useful heuristic that there are different human breeds. There's the breed, for instance, because a lot of these personality traits are heritable, and it's not clear what's heritable. Maybe it's increased, cortisol, decreased serotonin, or some specific receptor or enzyme, and somehow it just manifests itself by being more agreeable, less agreeable, more conscientious, less conscientious, more open to new experience, less open to new experience, higher IQ, lower IQ, whatever it is. The way they express themselves are ways that we understand them to be, personality differences, but what the actual mechanism is, could be very complex. But it's still the case that a lot of it is heritable, according to all these books I've been reading. And, so in my mind, I kind of joke around with the idea that they're just different human breeds. Like, there's the breed of humans who have tattoos and piercings, like facial piercings. And whatever that means, maybe they're very open to new experience. Maybe they're very low on, measures of just conformity, or measures of, I don't know what it would be, but in some sense, to me, it's almost like they're different breeds. Like their children will pretty much be a lot like them. Now, whether they actually get tattoos and piercings is a completely different matter, but clearly there's something going on. Some personality trait, some disposition for something, and it's primarily heritable, at least according to all these books. That could be an erroneous conclusion, but for the sake of argument, I just assume, until significant data shows itself otherwise, and the significant authors who I respect start coming out with that idea, as far as I'm concerned, it pretty much is heritable. So I almost think like, oh, there's the breed of humans who have tattoos and piercings. They'll make more of them. I should probably avoid them because I don't agree with a lot of their life choices. And like, oh, there's the breed of people who drive very recklessly. They drive very fast, much above the speed limit. They don't follow right of way. They don't, just drive safely. I'll probably avoid them. They might die someday. They might get someone killed. I'll try to avoid them. And yeah, I just think of that like, oh, there's the unchaste breed of females that like to show off their body and have a lot of fun. They're completely different than the chaste breed who want to be mothers or something. And I just think that to myself all the time, like, oh, it's the breed of people who have very high IQ. I like them. Oh, that's the breed of people who are very reckless, very bad at making life decisions. And in some sense, it could be an erroneous heuristic, but certainly it's true that, there are some people you want to avoid, some people you want to be friends with, some people you want to have kids with, some people you don't want to have kids with, some people you want your kids to be around, some people you don't want your kids to be around. And if the most simplistic way of saying that is, that's the irresponsible breed, that's the responsible breed, then I find that a pretty useful heuristic, and it even captures a lot of the genetic things that are going on. So, I suppose that's about it. I've really not been reading much more than that. Let's see here. I did read a few chapters of the two-parent privilege between that time, but nothing that really stuck with me very much. I'm like, a fifth of the way through this notebook now. Let's see here. I'm just trying to find maybe some notes that are kind of interesting to know. Or let's see. Oh, there's something called the Marriageable Men Pool Index. That's William Julius Wilson, used to describe why some groups of people would have a lot more difficulty marrying and staying around to raise kids together. And he calls it the Marriageable Men Pool Index, which basically says, take all the women in society and take all the number of men who are working full-time, and that's your marriageable men index. Just divide the number of men who work full-time by the number of women. And he says it was like 63% at the time, and it might be a lot lower now, and it might explain a lot of the lack of women who decide to get married, and therefore the number of single mothers is maybe men are just unwilling, unable to work full-time, and that's very real. I thought that was pretty interesting. So basically it says the best way to be a decent man is just work full-time, and at least you'll be in the Marriageable Men Pool Index. Yeah, a lot of this is not necessarily notes that anyone would care about except me. I'm things that are very specific. So, I guess I don't have much else to say. That's just me summarizing. I have been listening to The Blank Slate on audiobook. Audiobooks are not great. You can't just reread something. You can't check where a resource came from. You can't just reread like a certain part of a paragraph. You can't skim through it very easily, and a lot of times I find myself just kind of losing attention. And so audiobooks, I'd say you miss like 2/3 of what the book is actually saying if you're listening to an audiobook rather than just reading. But it's still, if you're driving or something, or you're working out, I guess, somewhat more useful than doing nothing. I've already listened to The Case Against Education by Bryan Caplan. So I listened to it like 2 or 3 times. I listened to a few more chapters of it, but I restarted it, listened to a few more chapters, but I thought, well, I'll just start going back to The Blank Slate and seeing what that had to say. It's interesting enough. Yeah, so I've been having a little bit of a questioning of what I'm doing with my time reading books. Of course, I graduated last year with my bachelor's in economics, I don't know. Um, a lot of the jobs I wouldn't necessarily want to do. I don't want to work in finance. I don't want to work in marketing. Um, yeah, I don't like any of those jobs. I don't like manipulating people into buying investments that are not good for them. Um, I don't like marketing. I don't like telling people to buy something that is not necessarily good for them. Um, in theory, I could do some assistant job, some very low paid or even unpaid, like internship, some assistant job for economics, whether that's for the government or, I don't know, some other economic position that would probably be very low paid, very or unpaid, and it would in theory have upward mobility, but it wouldn't pay as much as just working at a grocery store, where I'm making about 30 an hour. Last I looked, pretty much every assistant economic position was more or less minimum wage or part time, very very much part time. It would not even come close to paying the bills that I have. So it seems very like catch-22, like you just can't expect to be able to move up without already having the connections, already having the experience. Graduate school, everyone tells me to go to graduate school, but that's like a 3 or 4 year investment of my life. I'm already 33. I just turned 33 2 days ago, by the way. And so I don't like the idea of spending 4 more years of my life in school. I would have to work full time through it again, which is very stressful. You don't. It's just a stressful thing to work full time and have to go to school to pay your bills because I don't have parents who just pay for everything for me. In fact, I was at a restaurant the other day, the day before my birthday, picking up just some food because I was thinking I'll spoil myself. It's the day before my birthday. I'll eat something nice tonight. And I heard the family behind me saying, "Oh, when I go to college, I'm gonna go to graduate school right after, and I'm gonna study this, and then I'm thinking about taking a year off, a gap year, so I can work, learn how to be an adult or something." And the parents were saying, "No, don't take a gap year. What are you doing that for? Just finish grad school." And I thought, oh, that must be so nice to be so privileged that you could just go to grad school. You don't have to take out a $50,000 loan. You don't have to work full time through it. You could just choose to go to grad school or take a year off. Wow, that must be so amazing to have that privilege. I can't. If I wanted to go to grad school, I'd have to balance it with working full time. I'd have to take out a $50,000 loan. It'd be 3 years of my life. I'm already 33. 4 years of my life. I'd be almost 40 by the time I finish. Is that really when I want my life to, like my career, to actually get started? Is when I'm 40? Certainly it's better than 50, but it just does not seem realistic. It does not seem like it's available to normal people who have to work, who have to pay for everything themselves, who don't have privileged family who can pay for everything for them, and pad out their lives by making them only have to work 2 days a week or something, at that, if that. I just don't have access to any of those privileges, and so grad school does not seem very realistic, although I could be fooling myself. It could be a confirmation bias. Maybe there are options that I just haven't seen. But that's what it seems like to me. So that's kind of why I'm in this spot of like, well, I know I'm supposed to go to grad school, but it's so expensive, so much of my life. I'd really like to just take another year, read books. I mean, I don't know how many books I read in the last year since I graduated. It's not as much as it could have been. Before I went to college, I actually read, about a book a week. And so by the time I started college, I had already read about 100 books within the last year or two. And since then, maybe I've read another 50, 60, 70 books. I don't really know. But it's certainly less than like 50 books a year, 40 books a year, whatever it was at that time. Since going to college, of course, balancing working full-time at college, I could hardly read maybe a book a month. And I did, usually. I remember the summer at Santa Clara University, I think between the first and second year I was there, I read a good 15 books over that summer. Because I was finally free. No more college homework, no more studying, no more responsibilities that I feel that I would have to have. I could just work full time, and then at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, depending on when my schedule for work was, because that's the thing. I also have a very irregular schedule. It's like just-in-time scheduling. I don't have a predictable schedule. I can't choose my own hours. They just give me whatever is useful for them. Sometimes it's morning, sometimes it's daytime, sometimes it's night, sometimes it's overnight. It could be the weekend, it could be the weekday. I have no predictable schedule at all. So that's another thing that privileged people have. I don't have that. During that summer I read like 15 books. I remember the best one I read was Mindware by Richard Nisbett. I read that like 3 times already. That was like my 3rd time reading Mindware. I read Passions Within Reason, my favorite book by Robert Frank. And a bunch of other books I can't even remember now, but a bunch of other books. I might have reread like Coming Apart by Charles Beret or Our Kids by Robert Putnam. But yeah, since that year that I've graduated, I've read a lot of books. Not as much as I could have. I mean, in theory, if I was back to my pre-college days of reading a book a week, I would have read about 50 books now since I graduated between now. Instead, I would say I've read 25 books, maybe 20 books. Of course, I have a notebook so I can look and say, actually, yeah, I have read like 20 books, and then there's like maybe 3 or 4 books that I read but I didn't take notes on. What was one? Grit. I read Grit by, what was it? Duckworth or something. I read that and I thought, it doesn't seem like it's that backed by science. It's a lot of case studies, a lot of individual people's histories, not a lot of like actual broad data that would suggest that it's a real thing and that we can measure it and that it's useful to know or to improve. So I read through that book. I didn't take any notes, pretty much. And the same thing is true for Talking to Strangers. Who was that? Gladwell or something? I forget even who it was. But Talking to Strangers, I read through that and I thought, not a lot of interesting data there. Just a lot of pop science, case studies, individual personal histories. Not a lot of actual statistical data, empirical results of these things. It's just individual people's lives, which is very selection biased, very biased to have individual person's lives saying, this is what I did, look at how successful I am. That tells me nothing about whether that actual behavior led to success. You need broad statistical data to know if a behavior does statistically lead to success. That's called like the hindsight bias, selection bias, that's survivorship bias. Even in human diversity, he talks about a bias that's called restriction of range. So I guess people think the most successful people I know aren't even the people with the highest IQ. They're the people who just happen to work really hard and be very nice and outgoing. And Charles Murray says, yeah, that might be true because you don't associate with people who have extremely high IQs, people who are the magna cum laude, summa cum laudes of universities, people who become Nobel Prize winners or leading scientists or authors. You don't know any of those people, so as far as you know, IQ is not correlated to success because you haven't seen the people with all the high IQs. That's restriction of range. It's like a selection bias. If the pool of people that you're aware of is only limited to so much, then you have no idea what it's like for all the other people who are out there. So I just do not like pop science books that try to basically tell 1 or 2 people's lives as if those factors of their lives were predictive of their life, when really what you need is like statistical data. Like econometrics, economics, you would learn all this, but people don't really learn that. So what was I saying about how grad school is does not seem realistic to me? Oh, that family. I just thought, how privileged is it that you just have a choice. You can go to grad school. You can take a year off because your parents will pay for everything. You don't have to, I don't know, deal with life as if you're responsible for everything on your own. And yeah, I don't know how many books I've read over the last year. It's not as much as I'd like to have read, but it's something, I suppose. And yeah, I am kind of questioning, like, is this even a good use of my time? I mean, what else would I be doing? What are normal people doing? I've gained weight, mainly because I drank like a bottle of wine during my last year at university. Since then, I really don't like wine anymore. Wine makes me sick. What I have been drinking is Hefeweizen, and I'm sure it has the same amount of calories. What does it say in Drunk by Edward Slingerland is each glass of alcohol is almost a full meal of calories, 150, 200 calories. So yeah, drinking like a 4-pack of Hefeweizen every night, which is what I generally might do, is equivalent to having like 4 extra meals. So I've gained a lot of weight. I don't know what I weigh now, 190, 200 pounds. Before college, before I started drinking, I would say I weighed 150, maybe 140. I fit into 32s now. I barely fit into 38s. And so one thing that I could be doing with my time is trying to exercise more, but I just feel like the opportunity cost, like literally if I have the time and energy to work out for an hour and a half, that's hour and a half, 90 minutes, that's 45 pages of a book I could have read. Accumulating twice a week, just twice a week, exercising, is 90 pages a week that I could be reading, which turns into about a book every 3 weeks. So basically, if I exercised, yeah, I'd lose weight, I'd fit into my nicer clothes again, maybe I'd feel better, maybe I'd be more attractive or more healthy generally, but I'd be missing about a book every 3 weeks, and that would add up a lot. Over a course of a year, that would be, 15, 16 books that I'd be missing out on? So my question is, not that, life is this simplistic, you could just measure opportunity cost, although that's what economists try to do. That's what economics is try and measure something like that. But if I were to just measure that, 16 books a year about, I don't know, human psychology, evolution, statistics, I don't know, evolution, all these things that I like to learn, behavioral economics, social psychology, comparative anthropology, primatology, like physical anthropology, all these things that I like to learn, that I like to think makes me a more educated person. Exercising regularly would basically cut me out of 16 books a year. And I'm not sure if that's worth it. I think I might get more out of 16 books a year than I would out of exercise, but I don't really know. But that's one thing I've been thinking, well, what would I be doing instead of reading books? Having fun? That's useful to me. Which is what, kind of how I came up with that idea of like breeds, is I'm like this intellectual breed. I like to read books. I don't like fun. I don't know what you'd call that, the virtuous breed, Protestant virtue breed. But yeah. And I think to myself, well, where do I find breeds like me? Because all the breeds around me are not really. I haven't met anyone pretty much like me. At least very few people. If I have met them, it wasn't very obvious that that's what they valued in life. That's what their hobbies and interests were. But yeah, so kind of just wondering what to do with my life. Yeah, anyway, leave it at that.